Good evening and welcome to CYC News for today, the 29th of September 2013 AD and the 28th of Tut 1730 AM. I'm Daniel Noor.
And I'm Julia Gundi. In today's headlines, at least 80 people have been killed in the Saints Church attack in Pakistan, an Egyptian court bans all Muslim Brotherhood activities, and a United Nations probe investigates new alleged chemical weapon attacks in Syria.
We begin with our lead story, where burials have been taking place in the Pakistani city of Peshawar after a double suicide bombing killed at least 80 people and wounded at least 120 others at the All Saints Church last week. It is believed to be the deadliest ever attack on Pakistan's Christians. Reports say the walls of the church were dimpled by the force of the ball bearings that had been packed into the explosives. It was all in an effort to cause as much damage as possible. Hundreds of women were sitting beside the coffins, clutching them and sobbing, the men hugging and crying whilst their children looked on, bewildered.
It is unclear exactly who was behind the attack, with two militant groups claiming responsibility. Jandullah and the Junaid al-Hafiza, both with past links to the Pakistani Taliban, said they ordered the double bombing in retaliation for US drone strikes in Pakistan's tribal northwest. The Pakistani Taliban, however, condemned the attack as it frequently denies responsibility for attacks which take a heavy civilian toll. Political and religious leaders also condemned the attack, but angry crowds took to the streets, denouncing the state's failure to protect minorities. Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif on Sunday condemned the church attack and in a statement said he was praying for the recovery of those injured. Sharif said terrorists have no religion and that targeting innocents is against Islam. His government has announced 3 days of mourning.
A court in Egypt has banned all activities by the Muslim Brotherhood. The Cairo Court for Urgent Matters said the ruling applied to the Islamist movement, its non-governmental organisation, and any affiliated groups. It also ordered the interim government to seize the Brotherhood's funds and form a panel to administer its frozen assets until any appeal had been heard. Military authorities had launched a crackdown on the group since ousting former President Mohamed Morsi July this year. Dozens of senior figures, including its general guide Mohamed Badi, have been detained on charges of inciting violence and murder. Hundreds of people demanding Mr. Morsi's reinstatement, most of them Brotherhood members, have also been killed in clashes with security forces. These portray the crackdown as a struggle against terrorism.
And in the Syrian crisis, the 5 permanent members of the United Nations Security Council have reached an agreement on a resolution over Syria's chemical weapons program. The resolution involves the planned safe destruction of Syria's entire chemical weapons arsenal to commence in November this year and be complete by the middle of next year. The UN says its team in Syria will also investigate 7 more alleged chemical weapon attacks. It's claimed 3 took place after a major shelling in Damascus in August involving sarin gas, which killed an estimated 1,400 people. Meanwhile, violence continues in Syria, where a car bomb killed at least 20 people near a mosque in Rankis, a town north of Damascus, just after Friday prayers.
US President Barack Obama and Iranian President Hassan Rouhani spoke by phone on Friday in the first direct communication between the US and Iranian leadership in more than 30 years. It signals that both sides are serious about reaching a pact on Iran's nuclear program. It came after President Rouhani told the United Nations that Iran's nuclear program is a peaceful attempt to generate electricity and not to build nuclear weapons. The two leaders expressed their mutual political will to rapidly solve the nuclear issue.
The US government is bracing for a possible shutdown as Republicans and Democrats in Congress remain deadlocked on a budget to continue its funding. In the event that funding stops, agencies have begun laying contingency plans by selecting workers considered essential. The Senate has passed a bill to fund the government until the 15th of November, but House Republicans have said they refuse to approve the bill without a provision to strip funding from President Barack Obama's health law. As a result, lawmakers are at a stalemate as the 1st of October deadline to pass a new funding resolution approaches. The looming shutdown is but one of two fiscal crises facing the US government. On 17 October, the US Treasury Department's authority to borrow money to fund its debt obligations expires, unless Congress approves a rise in the so-called debt ceiling. On Friday afternoon, President Barack Obama urged House Republicans to pass the Senate's stopgap budget bill and to extend the debt limit.
The population of Canada rose to more than 35 million in the last year. A newly released report by Statistics Canada, based on 2011 census data, showed a 1.2% increase over the previous year. The province of Alberta saw the fastest growth, at 3.4%, which the agency put down to international and interprovincial migration. However, Nova Scotia and New Brunswick shrank in population. Canada's total growth rate from 2006 to 2011 eclipsed those of both the US and the UK. As of the 1st of July, the nation's population was estimated at over 35.1 million, up over 400,000 from the year before.
To Mexico now, where torrential rain has caused fresh floods in the Mexican beach resort of Acapulco, less than 2 weeks after two storms killed 139 people in the area. Authorities evacuated people from high-risk areas and closed schools after flooding reached a height of more than 1 metre, leaving thousands of tourists stranded. The government issued renewed alerts for the rest of the state of Guerrero as further heavy rain was expected. Officials say the month of September is set to break rain records in Mexico by a large margin.
And in health, UK researchers claim that people on antidepressant medications should be aware they could be at increased risk of type 2 diabetes. The University of Southampton looked at available medical studies and found evidence that although the two were linked, there was no proof that one necessarily caused the other. It may be that people taking antidepressants put on weight, which in turn increase their diabetes risk, or that the drugs themselves may interfere with blood sugar control. Professor Richard Holt and colleagues say more research is needed to investigate what factors lie behind the findings. They added that doctors should keep a closer check for early warning signs of diabetes in patients who have been prescribed these drugs.
The UK's National Institute for Health and Care Excellence is concerned that people having beauty treatments like Botox could be at risk of infection from dirty needles. It says growing numbers of people are injecting tanning agents, dermal fillers and Botox at home and in salons, and some are lax about hygiene. Sharing needles can spread blood-borne diseases like HIV and hepatitis C. The organisation is updating its advice for England and Wales accordingly, which aim to encourage people to use sterile needle and syringe programs to stem the spread of infections.
And that's all for CYC News for today. Stay tuned for more Christian content on CYC. I'm Daniel Noor.
And I'm Julia Gundi from the CYC studios in Sydney, Australia. Good night and God bless.